Listen to me very carefully. Right now, as you are sitting there, there is a silent, invisible alarm siren blaring deep inside your physical brain. It is the reason you wake up exhausted, the reason your chest tightens at the grocery checkout, and why a strange noise from your car engine literally makes you feel sick. Society casually calls this modern stress, but from a strictly biological perspective, this is pure, unadulterated survival mode. Your brain is operating exactly like a cornered animal, constantly running terrifying simulations about layoffs, rent hikes, or sudden medical emergencies. Financial gurus and mainstream media will look you dead in the eye and tell you the only cure is to become a millionaire, build a real estate empire, or found a tech startup. They are selling you a beautifully packaged lie. The absolute truth, backed by profound neuroscientific research, is that the magic threshold to fundamentally rewire your biological operating system is not $1 million. It is not even $100,000. The exact mathematical turning point that transforms you from a terrified hostage of the economy into a sovereign architect of your destiny is exactly $20,000. Welcome back to FinGraphy. My name is Nick, and today we are bypassing the basic budgeting advice to go profoundly deep into the hidden psychology of wealth. We will explore exactly how accumulating your first $20,000 triggers a monumental biological metamorphosis that will change the trajectory of your entire life. By the end of this deep dive, your paradigm will shift, and you will never look at a single dollar bill the exact same way again. To truly comprehend the sheer magnitude of this $20,000 threshold, we must perform a ruthless psychological autopsy on living paycheck to paycheck. Human beings are governed by 4 primal emotional triggers, but the absolute most dominant is the self-trigger. This is your core instinct for biological self-preservation. When your bank account hovers near zero, your brain perceives this total lack of capital as a direct, immediate threat to your life. You exist in a perpetual state of fight or flight. A devastating stress hormone called cortisol floods your entire bloodstream. This relentless financial terror literally destroys your cognitive function. Your prefrontal cortex, the highly advanced part of your brain responsible for long-term strategic planning, essentially shuts down to conserve energy. The primitive, reactive amygdala violently takes over the steering wheel of your life. This profound biological hijack is exactly why people who are completely broke often make terrible, self-destructive decisions. You accept a toxic, degrading job because you are far too terrified to negotiate. You consume cheap, highly processed garbage food because you completely lack the mental bandwidth to plan a healthy meal. You stay in emotionally draining relationships because you literally cannot afford the security deposit to move out. You are effectively trapped inside a burning building. You absolutely cannot think about the complex architecture of building generational wealth when you are just trying not to catch on fire today. But then, if you can summon the strength to begin saving, a miraculous shift happens. Research reveals that accumulating just $2,000 in an emergency fund instantly boosts your cognitive capacity by a staggering 21%. It acts as a tiny fire extinguisher, but when you push through the pain and finally accumulate $20,000, which represents roughly 6 solid months of vital living expenses for the average single working citizen, the burning building is permanently extinguished. The toxic cortisol stops flowing. The primitive, fearful amygdala powers down. Your highly intelligent prefrontal cortex comes back online, brighter and sharper than ever. You wake up, look at that beautiful 5-figure number, and realize that if the economy crashes tomorrow, you will be perfectly fine for half a year. That realization does not just make you smile. It physically heals your nervous system. You stop surviving, and for the first time in your adult life, you begin to truly strategize. Let us directly address the brutal mathematics of acquiring this $20,000 shield. Getting to this specific number from absolute zero is undeniably the single hardest financial endeavor you will ever face. It is a grueling test of your psychological endurance. Let us break down the exact mathematical reality. If you aggressively save $1,000 every single month and invest it in an index fund that returns an average of 8% annually, it will take you approximately 19 agonizing months to cross the $20,000 finish line. That is over a year and a half of looking your friends in the eye and saying no to expensive dinners. It feels exactly like pushing a massive stone boulder up a vertical cliff face. You are fighting a violent battle against the gravity of your own impulses and the relentless marketing machine of the world. But here is the magnificent secret that the wealthy implicitly understand. Once you push that heavy boulder over the peak of the mountain, the fundamental laws of financial physics completely invert in your favor. Let us examine the journey to your second $20,000. You maintain the exact same discipline. You continue to save $1,000 every month, but this time, it does not take you 19 months. It takes you only 17 months. You just magically erased 2 entire months of physical suffering and labor from your timeline. Why did this happen? Because your initial $20,000 is actively compounding. At an 8% return, your capital is generating roughly $1,600 entirely on its own merit over the course of a year. You did not have to set an alarm clock or deal with a toxic boss for that money. It was generated entirely by the forward velocity of your existing wealth. As you continue to push forward, this mathematical acceleration becomes incredibly violent. By the time your total portfolio reaches $400,000, your passive investments alone will generate your next $20,000 in just 5 mere months. The exact same amount of wealth that originally cost you nearly 2 years of your life, blood, and tears is now appearing in your brokerage account automatically, 2.5 times every single year. Your first $20,000 is pure, concentrated escape velocity. You must manually overcome the crushing gravity of systemic poverty. But once you finally escape the atmosphere, you enter the beautiful, frictionless vacuum of compounding wealth, where money magically creates more money while you sleep. However, as you relentlessly approach this glorious financial milestone, you are going to be violently and continuously attacked by the second primal human drive, which behavioral psychologists refer to as the recognition trigger. The recognition trigger is our incredibly deep, insatiable, evolutionary need to be validated, respected, and admired by the other members of our tribe. In ancient times, being rejected by the tribe meant literal death in the wilderness, so the desire for social status is permanently hardwired into our DNA. Modern consumer society, spearheaded by incredibly intelligent and ruthless advertising executives, is brilliantly and maliciously engineered to weaponize this exact trigger against you. The entire global marketing industry exists for one single, unified purpose, which is to convince you that you are fundamentally inadequate, unattractive, and unsuccessful unless you purchase their highly inflated, rapidly depreciating luxury goods. When you are financially broke, you feel invisible to the world. You feel completely insignificant. So, the exact moment you finally scrape together your first few $1,000s, the primal urge to satisfy the recognition trigger becomes incredibly intoxicating and almost impossible to resist. You desperately want to prove to your former high school classmates, your highly judgmental relatives, and total strangers judging you on social media that you are finally a winner. So what do the vast majority of people do? They march directly into a luxury car dealership and proudly sign a predatory, high-interest, 84-month loan for a $60,000 vehicle they absolutely do not need. They strap a $5,000 designer mechanical watch to their wrist. They purchase massive, heavily branded clothing so the world knows exactly how much they spent. They effectively trade their hard-earned, life-saving biological shield for an incredibly fragile, transparent illusion of wealth. They desperately want to look rich, which is the exact mechanism that guarantees they will remain permanently poor. But when you successfully lock away your first $20,000 in an investment account and completely refuse to touch it, something incredibly profound and entirely magical happens to your internal psychology. Your desperate, burning need for external, tribal validation completely evaporates like water on a hot stove. You permanently transition into a highly elevated state known as stealth wealth. You can comfortably walk into a crowded room wearing a simple $20 cotton t-shirt and generic, comfortable sneakers, and you do not feel a single ounce of shame, embarrassment, or inferiority. Why? Because you possess the ultimate, unshakable superpower of internal validation. You know exactly what your precise net worth is. You know that if you genuinely wanted to, you could buy the expensive watch in absolute cash right now, but you actively and strategically choose not to because you value your ultimate freedom infinitely more than you value the fleeting, meaningless admiration of total strangers sitting next to you at a red light. You begin to look at the people desperately flaunting designer logos and financing depreciating assets, not with feelings of jealousy, but with feelings of profound, empathetic sadness. You realize the devastating truth that they are literally selling their future decades of freedom, their peace of mind, and their actual life energy just to look temporarily rich for a few minutes on a social media application. Mastering the recognition trigger is the ultimate financial superpower. It makes you entirely immune to the sophisticated, manipulative marketing tactics that keep the vast majority of the middle class permanently enslaved to massive credit card debt and crippling car payments. You stop playing the unwinnable game of status, and you start playing the infinite game of absolute sovereignty. Moving even deeper into this complex psychological labyrinth, we must urgently discuss the money trigger itself and the absolute deadliest, most devastating trap that is currently waiting to destroy you the exact moment your account balance finally crosses the $20,000 line. I have personally seen this horrific tragedy play out thousands upon thousands of times in the personal finance space. A highly dedicated person works incredibly hard, sacrifices their daily comforts for nearly 2 years, and finally hits the monumental goal. They log into their brokerage account on their phone, they see that beautiful, shining $20,000 number, and suddenly, their primitive brain completely short-circuits. A massive, overwhelming tidal wave of dopamine floods their entire nervous system. They think to themselves, I have worked so incredibly hard for this. I have been so intensely disciplined for so long. I have suffered enough. I finally deserve a massive reward. I deserve to treat myself. This is the exact, precise moment they completely lose the financial game. They take $5,000 completely out of the market to go on a lavish, totally unnecessary vacation to a tropical resort. They take another $10,000 out to completely remodel a perfectly functional, undamaged kitchen just because they wanted granite countertops. In a matter of mere weeks, they absolutely obliterate the biological shield they spent years of their precious life building. They completely misunderstand the fundamental, core purpose of this money. Listen to me very clearly, and let these words sink deep into your subconscious. Your first $20,000 is absolutely not a reward for your good behavior. It is not an arbitrary high score in a video game that you cash in for a prize. It is not lottery winnings. It is the literal, concrete, indestructible foundation of your entire sovereign future existence. Treating it like a massive, discretionary spending account is the exact equivalent of taking years to carefully pour the concrete foundation of a massive skyscraper and then immediately taking a heavy sledgehammer and violently destroying the concrete just because you felt like having a celebration. True, irreversible financial enlightenment occurs when your relationship with the money trigger completely transforms. You permanently stop viewing money as a mechanism to acquire physical objects, and you start viewing money strictly as a mechanical tool to acquire time. Every single dollar you save is not a piece of paper to be traded for a gadget. It is a tiny, highly trained soldier in your personal financial army, completely dedicated to fighting for your future freedom. When you look at that $20,000 in your account, you should not feel the burning, anxious desire to spend it. You should feel a deep, immense, protective satisfaction in hoarding it. You become a fierce guardian of your own capital. You realize that spending $30,000 on a brand new, depreciating car does not just cost you $30,000. Because of the devastating mathematical reality of lost opportunity cost and the power of compound interest, that car actually steals roughly $140,000 of future wealth away from the older version of yourself over the next 20 years. Once you truly, deeply internalize the mathematical reality of opportunity cost, buying depreciating junk completely loses its psychological appeal. The dopamine hit vanishes. You realize you would much rather drive a highly reliable, 10-year-old vehicle and sleep peacefully at night, knowing your money is relentlessly multiplying in the background, rather than driving a brand new luxury vehicle while secretly suffering from crippling financial anxiety every time the monthly payment is due. Now, let us critically examine the massive, life-altering impact this $20,000 milestone has on your professional career trajectory, because this is precisely where the true return on investment becomes truly exponential and almost entirely unfair. When you have zero savings and massive debt, you are not functioning as an equal employee in a free market. You are effectively functioning as a modern hostage. Your corporate employer holds the absolute terrifying power of life and death over your daily financial existence. If they demand that you work 60 grueling hours a week without proper compensation, you comply. If they pass you over for a major promotion that you clearly and objectively deserved, you silently swallow your bitter anger and force a smile. You absolutely cannot negotiate aggressively, you cannot set healthy professional boundaries, and you certainly cannot threaten to leave the company, because losing your primary income stream for even 3 short weeks would result in a total catastrophic financial collapse. You exude an invisible, highly palpable aura of desperation, and corporate management can subconsciously smell that desperation from a mile away. They know with absolute certainty that you are permanently trapped, so they treat you exactly like someone who has absolutely no other options. But the precise, magnificent second you accumulate $20,000 in liquid, accessible capital, the invisible steel handcuffs completely shatter. You have officially acquired what is known in the financial world as walking away money. You are no longer a desperate, fearful subordinate. You instantly become a sovereign business of one, choosing to enter into a voluntary, mutually beneficial contract with your employer. This profound psychological liberation alters your entire physical reality and professional presence. You literally stand up straighter. You make stronger eye contact. You speak with calm, measured, undeniable authority in executive meetings. When your annual performance review finally arrives, you calmly and rationally present the hard data proving your immense value to the organization, and you clearly state your requirement for a massive 20% raise. You do not ask with a trembling voice or beg for a favor. You state a firm business proposition, and here is the absolute magic trick of the universe. Because you actually have the financial capacity to survive comfortably for 6 months without them, you are completely and totally unafraid of them saying no. If they refuse your request, you do not panic. You simply smile, return to your desk, and begin strategically applying for much better positions at competing firms. However, in the vast majority of real-world cases, they absolutely do not say no. Human beings, especially high-level corporate executives, are incredibly receptive to genuine, unshakable confidence. When they see that you are an independent, highly powerful individual who is genuinely not afraid to walk away from the table, your perceived market value absolutely skyrockets. They suddenly realize they cannot afford the massive operational cost of losing you and training a replacement. Your $20,000 shield gives you the ultimate leverage to massively increase your top-line income, which in turn allows you to save even more money at an accelerated rate, which gives you even more leverage. It is a glorious, unstoppable, compounding upward spiral of career dominance and financial accumulation. As we approach the highest levels of this journey, we must observe how your entire economic philosophy permanently shifts from the exhausting micro level to the powerful macro level. Systemic poverty forces you by absolute necessity to be a micromanager of pennies. You spend immense amounts of emotional energy and precious time clipping 50-cent coupons from the Sunday paper, driving 20 minutes across town in heavy traffic just to find a gas station that is a few cents cheaper, and agonizing for 10 minutes over whether to buy a $3 cup of coffee or the generic store-brand cereal. You are fighting a brutal, exhausting war in the muddy trenches, completely focused on incredibly small, mathematically irrelevant skirmishes. The absolute truth of the universe is that skipping a daily $3 coffee will absolutely never make you rich. Even if you practice flawless discipline and save $3 every single day for an entire year, you would only accumulate about $1,000. While $1,000 is not nothing, it is absolutely not enough capital to fundamentally change your life trajectory. It will not buy you a home, and it certainly will not fund your retirement decades. But once you secure your $20,000 baseline foundation, your vision dramatically expands. You elevate yourself above the trenches to the macro level. You permanently stop agonizing over irrelevant $3 daily purchases, and you start focusing your immense cognitive energy entirely on $30,000 structural decisions. You realize that the true, massive pillars of wealth building are your primary housing costs, your transportation strategy, your tax optimization, and aggressively growing your primary income stream. Instead of spending 2 hours cutting tiny coupons to save $4, You spend those 2 hours taking an advanced online course to master a new software skill that will eventually increase your annual salary by $15,000. Instead of obsessing over the price of organic vegetables, you spend a weekend deeply analyzing your long-term investment portfolio to ensure you are avoiding high mutual fund management fees that could slowly bleed hundreds of thousands of dollars from your net worth over your lifetime. You ruthlessly and efficiently optimize the massive structural components of your financial life. You buy a reliable, used vehicle in cash instead of financing a new one. You house hack or rent a modest apartment below your means. Because you have mastered these massive macro pillars, it grants you the profound, beautiful luxury of completely ignoring the trivial micro expenses. You achieve true, unshakable peace of mind because you know the structural integrity of your financial house is built on indestructible bedrock. You can finally afford to buy the nice coffee, take your partner out for a beautiful dinner, and actually enjoy the present moment without guilt, because your macro wealth building strategy is running flawlessly and automatically in the background of your life. Finally, we arrive at the absolute most critical phase of this psychological deep dive, which involves the romance trigger, arguably the most beautiful, sensitive, and vital area of the human experience. Financial illiteracy and chronic monetary stress act as a silent, devastating assassin that destroys more marriages, ruins more long-term relationships, and causes more domestic misery than any other force on the face of the earth. When a household is constantly drowning in high-interest consumer debt and operating on the terrifying, razor-thin edge of absolute zero, the physical home completely ceases to be a safe sanctuary. It transforms into a toxic, highly volatile war zone. Every single conversation about the electric bill, the grocery budget, or the cost of children's clothing is heavily laced with hidden resentment, deep-seated fear, and toxic mutual blame. You simply cannot nurture deep emotional intimacy, you cannot be romantic, and you cannot be a patient, loving partner when your nervous system is continuously screaming about biological survival. The romance trigger is completely suppressed by the self trigger. But when you and your partner commit to the process and work as a unified, unstoppable team to build that $20,000 financial fortress, everything in your shared reality permanently changes. The suffocating, crushing pressure is instantly lifted off the relationship. The home transforms back into a place of profound peace, deep trust, and mutual respect. You permanently stop fighting over minor, irrelevant credit card charges, and you start dreaming together about building a generational empire. You look at your partner not as a financial liability, but as a brilliant co-architect of your future. You give yourselves the absolute greatest gift possible in the modern world, which is the total freedom to simply love each other, support each other, and grow together without the constant, terrifying, dark shadow of financial ruin hanging over your heads. The long, brutal journey to $20,000 is not just about accumulating digital currency on a screen. It is a total, absolute, irreversible transformation of your biological responses, your psychological resilience, your professional power, and your personal sovereignty. It is the permanent transition from a life of fearful, reactive survival to a life of strategic, intentional design. So, I issue a massive challenge to you today. Stop mindlessly scrolling. Stop making elaborate excuses for why you cannot save. Stop feeding your hard-earned life energy to a ruthless consumer machine that is specifically designed to keep you permanently poor and compliant. Draw a massive, permanent line in the sand right now, today. Begin the arduous, beautiful, life-defining climb toward your first $20,000. Protect your capital with the ferocity of a wild animal. Build your biological shield. And prepare to meet the incredibly powerful, unstoppable, supremely confident version of yourself that is patiently waiting on the other side of that mountain. If this message ignited a fire in your mind today, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment down below committing to your financial goal, and join the FinGraphy community as we continue to relentlessly decode the ultimate psychology of wealth. Take absolute control of your life today, because the harsh reality of the world is that absolutely nobody else is coming to save you.